Welcome to today's webinar, Unlocking Workplace Solutions, the Power of Solution-Focused Leadership. My name is Christina, and on behalf of Myosh, I am so excited to have you all here with us today. We are thrilled, absolutely thrilled, to be joined by one of my favourite webinar presenters, Annette Gray, who is a highly respected coach and leadership expert who will be sharing invaluable insights into how leaders can shift from focusing on problems to driving real solution-based change in the workplace. Now, before we dive in, I just want to encourage everybody to make this session as interactive as possible. So please feel free to use the Q&A function to ask any questions you have during the presentation, or the chat box is open as well. Drop your thoughts, your ideas or comments, whatever you're thinking. We want to hear from you. So please don't be shy and utilize that function for us, please. Now, I am going to be recording today's session. So if you have to duck out, or if you were unable to catch up with us today right now, we will send you out the recording afterwards with a few slides and a few resources as well. So let's get started, hey? And explore how you can become a more confident and effective leader with practical tips you can start using tomorrow. So Annette, over to you for a little introduction.
Oh, thank you so much. And I just might acknowledge the land I'm on. I'm on Guringai People's land in Sydney, in Turramurra, Sydney, and I'm surrounded by beautiful bush. Not too much longer. I'm moving in a couple of weeks with a beautiful creek out the back. But I want to pay my respects to elders past, present, and emerging, and also acknowledge all our ancestral backgrounds to how we came here today. So, yeah, my background is I have been a leadership coach for the last 23 years. And 12 years ago, no, 13 years ago, I came across this concept called solution focus. And it was an actual game changer for me, because even though I was training leaders in how to be coach-like in their conversations as well as mentors, this just cut through everything. It made it quite simple for people. And ever since 2011, I have been learning as much as I can around this technique. And I am a member of Solution Focus in Organisation, which is a global association, and often go to those conferences and things. But I love working with leaders and mentors to be coach-like in their conversation. So a lot more asking and a lot less telling. Yeah.
It's very important work that you're doing. So you mentioned solution-focused approach was a game changer for you. Can you elaborate a little bit more on what you think makes this approach so impactful in leadership and coaching?
Well, it might be useful if I show you the model. Yeah, okay. Because and those listening, have a piece of paper and pen with you, because I'd like you to draw it out, because it's a really, really useful tool in any conversation. And I take it personally in terms of what's going on for me at the moment. I'm moving house, I'm packing up. I could be very problem focused in, oh my gosh, there's so much to do, but having a solution focused lens, I can actually go look at what progress I've made, what might be my next small step. So, I'm actually using these techniques in my day-to-day life, because as typical people, anyone, what we do is we default negative. We default to the deficit. Yeah. And if you think about we have a lot of teeth. And if we lost one tooth, our tongue would spend the whole day going to that gap, not going, I've got 25 other beautiful teeth. Yeah. So it's a natural default that our brain has to look at what's not working rather than look at what is working.
It's like a habitual negativity bias, isn't it?
Exactly. exactly. And so we don't realize, like I know this stuff, but I still get caught in going, oh, woe is me, all these things that are wrong, and what am I going to do? But solution focus cuts through all that and steps over the problem to look at what's wanted instead. So if I show you the actual model, and it actually works really well in shifting of where we have focused, and a lot of you will be safety professionals, and a lot of roles like safety professionals, like compliance leaders, like accountants sometimes, like police officers, we can look at for what is wrong, but it's actually not that helpful, and it actually disengages us from others. So let me just show you. Oh, I'm going to go here. If the first axis is the timeline, so that's the horizontal. So we can focus our conversations on the past, or we can focus our conversations on the future, and the present is right in the middle. The other axis is the content. So if you put in the middle of that horizontal axis, you put this here. This is the content axis. We can focus on, the good stuff or what's wanted, or we can focus on the not so good stuff, what is not wanted. And if we put it together, we end up with this model, which is these two quadrants at the top are focused on the positive content, and the quadrants down the bottom is the negative content. And if we look at it further, please, excuse me, quadrant one is, what is it we're aiming for? What's the preferred future we want? Yeah. And what would that look like in concrete detail? If you think of some of the risks that you have at your work site or your workplace, we can get really clear of what we want around it rather than what we don't want. And that's why it's really important that we unpack the preferred future in a really concrete, detailed way. We also want to look at, well, what's working already is quadrant two. So that's the positive content about the past. So for instance, I was coaching someone, a leader, yesterday, and this was her second session. And she told me, I opened the conversation with, so tell me what progress or what's better since we first spoke. And she started to tell me all these things that she'd done since last time we'd spoken, which was 2 weeks prior. If I hadn't asked that question, what's better or what progress you've made, which is a very solution-focused question, and if I'd said to her, how are you? She would have defaulted, oh, I've got so much on my plate, I haven't, I'm so busy and everything. But because I was so targeted around my opening question, what's better since we've last seen each other, or what progress have you made? Her brain then searched for the good stuff. Yeah.
It's an optimistic approach, isn't it? It's perfect. I love it.
Exactly. Yeah. Whereas if I'd said to her, how are you, which is a neutral question, people default negative. Yeah, it's just a natural thing. And experiment with this. Start your conversation.
I'm immediately thinking, yesterday I was asked that question, oh, how have you been? And I was like, oh, busy. Like I just defaulted to busy. But then I went, but good, but busy.
Yeah.
So I'm kind of like, because I'm myself, I'm quite an optimistic person. However, I do find when I don't have the energy to explain anything further, I'll just default to negativity, and I'll default to that sort of way of thinking of, oh, just busy, or like just whatever. So yeah, and you're 100% right. We were talking about this yesterday with some colleagues about how to reframe our dialogue to make it look like that we are not pushing and we're not annoying and we're not constantly following up, but we're just allowing a touch point for when you are ready to follow up. Do you know what I mean? Like you're just reframing questions to come across a different way and to get a different answer.
Well, yeah, it's actually the fastest route to change. Yeah, to be solution focused. And you'll see the name of this, and it's an interesting backstory. Hey Sun Moon, who I know very well, who's in Toronto in Canada, she called it, she's a communication scientist and coach and trains coaches as well as leaders. She says, she called it the dialogic orientation quadrant. And the reason why she called it this complicated name, so the scientific world would treat us seriously. Because she did 10,000 hours analysing which conversations worked. Which quadrant did they, and she found that the ones that were future focused and tapped into what it was already working tend to help people make progress quicker. So quadrant 3 is the problem past. And most people, if you're in a leadership role or a technical expert role, people will often start with the problem they have. And they often start in quadrant 3. So this has gone wrong, or this is a challenge, or this is a problem that we need to fix. You don't have to go and unpack that problem in great detail. You only need just enough before we redirect it to, so what is it you want instead? What would that look like? Or we could go here. Has this arisen before? What seemed to work in the past when you were focused on this? Because often when people present a problem, it's generally they've had a taste of that previously, where they've had an experience of that previously.
I was going to say, yeah, go on.
I was just going to say, so we want to tap in to that expertise and resourcefulness. So tell me, is this a new thing that's popped up on your site or your workplace? What has seemed to work in the past to able to manage through it? So we want to actually utilize people's know-how. Yeah,
that leads perfectly into my next question and thought. And it's so many leaders and colleagues would be like today are dealing with teams or, like I said, colleagues or even leaders that often will raise an issue or a negative experience. So they'll come to you with that negative experience first. Why do you think people tend to focus on problems in the workplace, and how can leaders encourage more solution-orientated conversations? So just unpacking what you've said a bit more, and how can leaders encourage this more?
I think tune into questions you're asking. Yeah, because often we're asking very problem-orientated questions. So often we want to find the root cause of why this is such an issue, a problem, a challenge. So if you think about, something, an incident that's happened at work, so you could say, tell me what happened, or you could redirect to, so it seems like this has worked 80% of the time. How come? What is it when we get it right? How come? What are the things in place that are actually working?
Yeah. When it's not broken, what's going well? Like what are you experiencing when it's not broken?
That's right. So if I give you a really good example, actually, I realize I didn't explain quadrant 4 is what we call the dreaded future. We don't do anything about the problem, we'll be in this dreaded future. And I realized I was caught in this cycle of conversations with my husband around he loves food, so he struggles with his weight. And I could be problem orientated, and I have been problem orientated in the past. And I've said, you got to lose weight, because if you don't lose weight, you end up having a heart attack. So that didn't go down too well. But if he did raise, oh, gee, I got to do something about my weight, I often
Let's go
say
for a
to him,
walk together.
yeah, or I'll say to him, hey, 6 years ago or 5 years ago, you actually lost 10 kilos. How did you do that? What was it that seemed to work at that time?
Yeah.
He said, well, I got this new map and I had to be accountable to putting in what my weight was and what I'd eaten for the day. It's like, okay, wondering if that's something that you could try again. So I didn't try and solve it for him by trying to drag him forward around, this is what you should do. I was enabling him to come up with a decision. And I'm wondering if we could do an exercise now
Yeah.
with everyone. And if put your responses in the chat.
Oh, yes.
If you rated yourself either on how much exercise you're doing or how healthy, in terms of healthy eating, if you gave yourself a score out of 10, what score would you give?
Is 10 being the
10
healthiest
is,
version of yourself?
yes,
Yeah.
10 is the healthiest version of yourself. Great clarifying, Katrina. So on a scale, 1 is you're
I'm going to go 5.
Okay, 5, and we've got you've put 5 and
Oh,
Tracy's
Tracy too.
5. Okay, so I
What
want
a
you
7.
on
Gosh, I need your
mega
motivation.
awesome 7. So each of you, I want you to put down 3 things of how come you're that high. What is it that 3 things that you're doing that gets you to the 5? How come? Just jot those down and maybe put one of them in the chat. What's one out of those 3 that you're doing? Put it in the chat that's working. When you get it right, what are you doing?
I put down myself walking at least 7,000 steps each day. So that's one of my core goals. There are a few other goals that I would love to reach, but that is one of my core goals. I also just want to circle back to the way that you asked that question.
Yeah.
What made us so high?
Yes.
I looked at that and thought 5 was low. I instantly went to that negativity bias, didn't I? I went straight to, I was like, oh gosh, 5 is a horrible score to give myself. There's so much room for growth. But you said, why am I so high? I'm not a 1, am I? You practice
Yeah.
what you preach, don't you?
Yeah. So the way you unpack it, you have to be very conscious of what is the question I'm asking. So Tracy, when you're swimming, how do you do that? How do you keep that on your weekly, agenda that you're going to go swimming? When you get it right, what's the one thing, Tracy, that actually helps you get to the pool or the ocean or wherever you
Yeah, what's
swim?
your why, I guess, is what you're trying to uncover.
No, not necessarily the why. It's more how to.
The
Yeah.
how.
What are the
Okay,
things?
how you do it. So
How do you do that? Is a really good follow-up question when
I see
because
what you're saying.
scale is a really great example of a 10 is our preferred future. Yep. So I'm eating healthy all the time, or I'm exercising regularly all the time would be a 10.
I guess if you were to put
Tracy's giving us a response. The enjoyment of the spa pool after the swim. Love that, Tracy. Yeah, so it's that reward. But I'm curious, Tracy, even before you get to the pool, what helps you get out the door to go to the pool? What sort of strategies have you had in place that makes you go to the pool rather than go, you know what, I'm just going to sit on the lounge and watch the telly or sit on the lounge and scroll through my phone? What seems to work when you are regularly going to the pool? That's a reward, the spa part. But even before that, how do you get out the door to get to the pool?
For myself with the 7,000 steps a day, I
Yeah.
use my reminders on my Apple Watch to tell me where I'm about, like where I'm at in each part of the day to make sure that I'm staying on track. But so I guess that's the tangible how, but the how I keep staying on track is I can't stand when I promise myself to do something and I don't do it. And so I always have that thought in my head when I do something, or I say I'm going to do 7,000 steps a day. If I think, oh, I just can't sit on the lounge for a bit, I'll just watch this for a bit. I think no, because I'll hate myself afterwards if I don't reach that 7,000 steps.
So that reminder on your phone is a great little strategy that you have to actually keep you focused.
Exactly. Yeah. So I have the mental game, but I also have the tangible aspect of it.
Yeah. I'm just looking at the chat. Mega said some time of movement 4 to 5 times a week. Awesome. I love that concept of some type of movement. So it enables you to be
Keeping
flexible.
it broad. Yeah.
Yeah. And that's the thing, around exercise or eating. It's finding what works so you can do more of it.
Bringing this back to a workplace scenario, I guess as a leader or a mentor, for instance, if somebody comes to you requesting a review for a potential pay rise, you could say to that staff member, on a scale of 1 to 10, how well do you think you're doing your job? They could potentially say a 6. And then you could say, well, what makes you think, like, how did you get so high to be a 6?
Yeah.
But then to justify the request of a pay rise, what are you going to bring to the table to get yourself to a 7 or an 8 or a 9 or a 10? Do you know, like, so if you scale it back to a workplace scenario, this system that you're talking about and reframing your questions and using that scale and what brings you up that high in your mind would work just as well.
Yeah, exactly. So a great definition of solution focus is change is happening all the time. What we want to do is notice the useful change and amplify it. So let me just show you this. So change is happening all the time. The simple way to change is to notice the useful change and amplify it. So here's a work example. I was brought in to work with a general manager leader in a finance sector organization. When I was brought in and I was briefed by the HR person that I needed to help this general manager because their engagement score, the results of their engagement score was the lowest, that division was the lowest in the company. Yeah. So I was there to coach the general manager to help her get her division back up in terms of, employee engagement. So the question I asked her straight away was, because I think on a 100-point scale, it was 29. Yeah, they were 29 and the rest of the organization was in the 60s. Yeah. So my opening question to that general manager was, so you're 29 out of 100. What seems to be working? Because if you think about it, she's sort of, the division's a third of the way doing things right. Yeah. So, the HR person had the whole results of the survey there. And I said, let's go to the higher scores and let's look at how come they're working. What is it that's working? So you could just see physically this general manager just relax.
I was going to say it's a relaxing way to ask somebody a question, isn't it? You could see they would be so tense, and then you come in and reframe that question in such a positive way. And like, even when you just said that 5, how did you get that high? I was like, oh yeah, it's not that bad.
Yeah. So that what happened is the HR person who was in the meeting at the same time, she was wanting to go to all the things that aren't working. Yeah. So I had to keep redirecting it, but these scores are much higher. I'm curious, how come? What is it that seems to be working in these parts of the survey that we can bring across to some of the other areas? And that's what I mean by useful change is there all the time. So when we, organizations go through change, have change management processes happening. And if you think about what is going on now, we are in workplace, the world, we're in a real transition. So we just don't know what's going to end up happening with climate change. We want more gender equality. We want more sustainability. You know, if you think about all those sustainability goals, you know, the economy's challenged at the moment. So being problem focused is not useful when change is complex. It's much easier to cut through complex change with getting clear of what we want rather than what we don't want. Yeah. And how do we actually step into that? And basically the areas of focus have the biggest impact is our future. What is that? Where is it we're trying to get to? And our next small step. Yeah. So it's, don't do the bit in between. If we think about COVID and the impact of COVID and the all the politicians and medical advisors and all those people who were responsible for managing through it, they couldn't have a detailed action plan of how they were going to address saving people. And, you know, vaccine was one way, but it wasn't a detailed plan. It was, the one thing we're clear of, we don't want people dying. Yeah. So why don't we try this? Yeah. And it was very iterative. Yeah. We'll try this, do this bit and move on to the next thing, and then assess, did that work? Oh, that worked in a little and in a few places. How do we create more of that? So rather than unpacking the what's not working, so complex change, this is really, really useful.
With so you train many different leaders and different styles of leaders, and you're training them how to be more coach-like. What are some of your most practical tips or strategies that you share with those leaders to help them adopt a solution-focused mentality within their workplace on a day-to-day basis? Like, what would you suggest to a leader that needs help reframing their mindset to become more solution-focused?
I think the key thing is people are resourceful. Yeah, we are very capable outside of work, our lives to purchase a home, or if we have all, or pay the rent and get to work every day. People are very resourceful. So how do you actually tap into that? Because what I see in workplaces, and it's so common, we have what we call a parent-child relationship. Yeah, I'm the leader, you're the team member, and I'm going to tell you, be more directive on what to do. If the leader can actually have adult conversations, so it's a bit like you walking the path with them, yeah, rather than pulling them forward or pushing them forward.
Standing beside them.
Yeah, it's being the guide on the side, then help them move forward. And I'm wondering if anyone would, if we're able to, Christina, if I could bring someone on, one of the people who are listening, to actually do a demonstration around what this can look like, a really quick demonstration. And the topic could be getting better at exercising, eating healthy, or it could be a challenge you have at work at the moment, a small challenge you have at work at the moment.
All right, I've just popped into the chat. Let me know who would like to volunteer. And you don't have to have your video on. I can just click allow to talk. Oh, Roxanne, sorry. Let me add you in here.
Awesome. It'd be great if we could see Roxanne, because it actually works. If you're open to it, Roxanne, if putting your video on.
Can you hear us, Roxanne?
Yes, I'm happy to have my video on.
Amazing.
Awesome. And Christina, it might be useful if you just put your video off so I can just work straight with Roxanne. So if you put your video on, Roxanne.
Oh, okay,
Bottom left.
Bottom left.
Where it says video.
Oh, it just has mute, it doesn't have video available.
Okay, let's do it without the video then.
Apologies.
So, Roxanne, what's the topic you would like me to focus with? Is it exercise, healthy eating, or is it something at work that's happening at the moment, a small challenge at work?
Yeah, a work challenge.
Okay.
And I would like it to be about talking to leaders, that you have an idea. You
Oh, I've just lost you.
not and so you are trying to convince them it is a priority, but they're talking down to you because you're not the leader as well. So how to have a matched adult conversation, as you just suggested.
Okay. So what's the question you have around this scenario? So when you said how to match.
Hi, there's a new legislation. I'm interested in proposing this project to help align a compliance objective that I think would benefit the company.
Right. And you need to influence a number of leaders to do this?
Yes, I do. My first headspace is that's impossible to get them all at once, so one at a time to sort of build each other so they can influence each other to go, yep, it's a good idea. Do you think it's a good idea? Yeah, I guess that's my interest is influence to each other, but
yeah,
one-on-one at first.
Roxanne, what have you done in the past that's actually brought in? Oh, we got you.
Yes.
Excellent. So when have you been in this situation before where you've had to introduce new legislation?
Yes.
Okay. And what's worked for you getting leaders on board with something new?
I mean, define work, because work, I would say yes, because when I first announced it, it was taken on board very well. As for implementing action plans and outcomes, that's a different story. But what worked was I announced to them that we should be the example. We should be the leader of change. We could be part of the first initial companies that takes this seriously.
Awesome. And how did you do that in what setting was it that you actually were?
I first approached the CEO. Because I think my current manager wasn't on board and helpful. I just asked the CEO if he had some time to talk about some new legislation that's coming out soon. This is about a year ago. And then from that prompted an agreement to have a presentation to the senior management team, in which I did get the regulator to come out, and we co-facilitated a presentation.
With the CEO?
With the regulator of
the
Safe Advocacy. The CEO was very mindful of what I was presenting, that it wasn't negative and it wasn't telling them off and it wasn't saying this should be done already, but very positive focused. So he requested to review the presentation and asked for some things to be added and taken out to align with his viewpoint, in which we accommodated that and then did the presentation. And it was a great presentation. We had everyone in the room energized and enlightened in the outcome. As for following through, complete drop-off.
Okay. So was there an agreement around the next step action after that presentation?
Sort of. Then the next step was we need to do a risk assessment on the workplace with employees' involvement, and the agreement on what tool to do that has taken us over 15 months.
Okay. So how do you want it to be? If this was making progress.
I want the leaders to feel empowered to make a decision to what tool, so we can start that action plan, because the work isn't even done yet. We haven't even jumped off level 1, where we're still level 1. We have the heart, but there's indecisiveness of what tool. Oh, but that one doesn't do this, but this one doesn't do that, this one does. So how do I empower my leaders to choose a tool to at least start with level 1? We can improve later. And I think there's maybe a culture that is, the lack of a better word, that could shred each other's perspectives, so no one ever feels empowered to continue moving on forward. I'm choosing this and I'm moving forward. It's, oh, I better not say anything because that person might then say, but what about this and what about, and it gets too hard, and then we put a pin in it and circle back.
It's as if people are needing things to be perfect to start. Perfectionism is never the key to start. I think you just need to start, and you need
completely
to start.
agree. Yeah. And I've said that this is unprecedented times. We can just start and we can improve, like all things. Everything improves and evolves.
Someone has to pave the way, don't they? It doesn't just appear in front of you.
Yes.
So Katrina, can you give this 2 minutes so I can demonstrate a couple of more things? Yeah.
Apologies.
That's all right. If you could just put your video off for that next 2 minutes. So you want your leaders empowered to make a decision.
Yes.
What difference would that make if you were able to get that?
Action, results. What's that word, like? The confidence in our leadership as well. So I guess like there's like a fulfillment there in we've achieved something together, and we could provide the workers with, we are doing something, we're not sitting on it.
Yeah. So you want to see action, you want to see results. Do you have a hunch of which particular risk that you want to select that might help them?
The psychosocial hazards.
Okay. So if they focus just on that.
Which is 14 hazards, yep.
Okay.
So it expands, yep. And it also leads into HR. It's not just safety. I'm a safety officer. And it also leads into an engagement survey project that was also on the cards, which has some alignment, but it isn't compliance based. It's a let's be nice and let's be good, an employer of choice, which is lovely. Definitely has alignments, but it's also not completely hazardous based. That is a compliance obligation as an officer in PCBU. Me as a safety professional, is my interest to inform and promote and protect the company. And I feel like I'm losing grip on that one. Okay.
So in 6 months' time, if you had made progress on the psychosocial aspect, what would be a sign that you're making progress on this?
That we would have rolled out a tool and we'll finally have some data to then discuss priorities over the next year, 3 years, 5 years, about how we could improve our company.
Awesome. So what would be a good name for this project if you called it?
Empowerment decisions. Decision empowerment.
Decision empowerment. Okay.
So my battery on my computer is just about to run out. I'm just going to have to quickly go grab it. If you give me just 10 seconds. I'm so sorry for everyone.
Oh no, I'm gonna finish in a sec. So a small step action. What might you take? Small step.
Perseverance, reminders.
48 hours. Sorry.
Perseverance and reminders to keep it the surface level discussion.
Yeah. So who might be your ally in this?
I'm not sure.
I think your CEO.
I think my CEO, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, get back to him.
Yeah, he was right on board with the regulator. Yeah.
Yeah, that's a good point. Thank you.
What's become clearer from our conversation?
To pinpoint what I can do.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Awesome. Thank you. Get your battery.
Thank you.
That was unreal.
So if we unpack that, I spent most of the time in quadrant 2 and 1. Yeah, for unpacking. Did you notice my question around, has Roxanne been in this situation before? Yeah, but she actually went to, when she first started this idea of, and speaking to the CEO, that worked, that they had that session. And then I asked her, so what does she want? Yeah, going forward, she said, I want leaders to be empowered to make decisions. Yeah? And we unpacked that a little bit, what that would look like and what difference it would make. And we came out with a project name, which was Decision Empowered. We don't tend to goal set anymore. Goal setting is a bit too contained. Whereas if we get clear on the direction we want to go, it tends to help people stay focused on that. Yeah. So we say, what's a good name for this project rather than what's your goal?
So it's not destination focused. It
is destination focused.
Yes, that's what I meant. It's like paving the way, but we may not get there in the way that we thought. It's never going to be linear. We're going to go all different ways, but we're getting to the same place.
Yes. So did you notice I stuck in quadrant 1, but then all I said is, what's your next small step action in the next 48 hours? One step. Because what happens with change, we take a step and a whole new world opens up. Yeah. So also, did you notice I didn't really give any answers? Yeah, I didn't tell
it's because Roxanne knows. She knows.
Yeah,
and
exactly.
All you did was, not to diminish yourself or your role or anything like that, but all you did was give Roxanne the power and the stage to unpack what she's got in her mind and reframe it into an actionable process. That's something that she can take on board herself and do that 1% better every day, and empower her to take that action upon herself and continue with that.
Yes. So it's interesting. Her project name is Decision Empowerment. That's what got modeled in this conversation.
Absolutely.
I can't shadow Roxanne and tell her what to do all the time.
Oh.
This is a one-off conversation. So the aim of the conversation is to help the person get clarity of what they want and help them take the next small step action.
It's such a hard task sometimes, I find, in the workplace, is you're given a task and you're given a goal or a destination, for example, but it is such an overwhelming path that you can see ahead of you that you get decision fatigue, or you get scared, or you might not be able to see clear enough to see what your first step will be. So I think your approach of reframing our questions, reframing our mentality and the way that we focus on things, particularly solution focusing, will be able to help us unpack what we're thinking, what we're seeing, what lies ahead of us, and take one tiny little step today that will help us take that next tiny little step tomorrow, and then forge through the path to our destination so much clearer and so much easier, and be so much more empowered doing it.
Yes. And the thing that you said there is, when we make the first step small and doable, they're more likely to take more after it.
You get more confidence in yourself, don't you?
Exactly. If we make the first step a bleep, generally people go, oh, that's too hard.
It's like, I want to lose 10 kilos by the weekend. Well, it's never going to happen. How about we lose 10 grams by the weekend? Like, let's break it down. Actionable steps. Yeah. I love that. Thank you so much. And again, thank you so much, Roxanne. That was incredible. I think we've got time for one last question. What's the time? Yeah. Going off everything, we just sort of covered why simplicity is so important in coaching and leadership. So I think we just covered all of that then, and it helps create confidence and empowers us to continue on with each step. What I want to know is giving feedback as a leader or a mentor or a colleague is often one of the toughest parts of leadership, especially when it's constructive. How can we use solution-focused techniques to provide feedback that drives positive change?
Sure. This is the number one thing I coach in how to have challenging, difficult conversations. So the thing I'll say here is the problem or the thing the person's not doing right or the irritating behavior that keeps happening, that doesn't happen 100% of the time. So how do you inquire into when it happens less? So if you think about, and here's the other thing is, your view of the reality for being the leader of that person mightn't be an accurate view of reality. So how about you check out their view of reality first before providing
what you perceive to be true.
Exactly. Yeah, because we all tell ourselves stories, and sometimes they're real, but they're not necessarily true. So we've got to be a bit humble and a bit holding back in terms of judgment around why someone's doing something. Yeah, it's not because they want to get you back. But if you think of an example, like, I need to give you feedback, Christina, that, you're always late for work. Actually, if you look at it reality-wise, you were late for work 3 out of the 5 days, but you got to work 2 days on time. Yeah. So how do you do that? When you get to work, like if I was to give you have a conversation with you about getting to work on time, I might raise it that way. Look, I want to have a conversation about starting punctually. Yeah. So I've reversed it from being you're always late.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I'll say, look, I noticed, there's been this pattern of arriving late, but I've also noticed on Monday and Tuesday that you did get to work on time. So I'm curious, how did you do that?
Yeah. I love that.
So we don't have to make it a conversation where it's, I'm going to give you feedback. You're always late for work, Christina, and you can't do that.
Doesn't it?
Exactly.
Yeah.
So we've got to look at
powerful switch to flip, isn't it? Look at your face. You're like, finally.
No, that's exactly right, because problems, issues don't happen all the time. Yep. So we actually have, if we're solution focused, we're looking for the exceptions to the problem. So here's an example. My poor dear husband came along. We were going through a patch of bickering and fighting all the time and arguing, and it tended to happen around breakfast time, and we're racing to get to work, and we'd not talk very nicely to each other. So I suggested we go to a solution-focused couples workshop, which he was so thrilled to be able to go to that. But I got in there and the facilitator said, guys, you might think we're here to talk about feelings. Yeah. We're not going to go or talk about the problems in your marriage. We're not going to do that at all. Where we're going to focus on, when the relationship is better, so on those weeks or days that we have a better day, how come? So we realized if we had a 2-hour walk on a Sunday morning, that set us up well for the week.
Oh,
yeah. And so rather than going into marriage counseling and everything and finding out who's whose view's right and what's wrong with the relationship. We stepped over the problem and went, when it works, we go for a walk for 2 hours, and that we don't tend to fight. And the other thing we agreed to do was on a Wednesday, we would have a meeting about what chores need to happen around the house, and that I was not allowed to mention it on our walk on a Sunday. I
love it's honestly, like Roxanne has just said, talking about the times that it worked instead of talking about the bad. And it's such a cliche, but it's like having a bad experience at a restaurant. You're almost guaranteed to write a bad review, aren't you? Whereas if you have a good experience, they have to beg you, they have to entice you, they have to incentivize you to leave a good review. And it's like, why are we like this? Like, I think this is so important, not just for the workplace, but for everywhere. And I'm just insanely excited about trying this in real life and trying to remember to refocus and reframe the question. If someone comes to me, oh, this never bloody works. Well, what about when it does? What happens? Like, it's so simple.
It's simple to learn.
Are you fired? Thank you.
Remembering to apply it is the hard thing. Yeah, because we default to, I am experiencing, and now my husband and I, because we're packing the house up of 18 years, and we can, and we can focus on all the things that we haven't done, that actually we've made a lot of progress of packing boxes and everything. So our mantra is small steps. What's one box we could do today? And
it often comes back. I host these webinars every week, and I find there is such an underlying theme across the board, no matter what our topic is, and it's 1% better every day. And it's just trying to keep an open mind and just do 1% better every day, no matter what the obstacle is or what the task is or what role you're playing. 1%. Tiny little changes lead to a better path, don't they? Like, it's amazing. I can't thank you enough, Annette. I think you are just fabulous. I know you've got a wonderful networking event to get to this evening that you're hosting, so I'm sure you're quite eager to get off the call. But again, thank you so much. Your insights are invaluable, especially today. I mean, it's such a simple message, isn't it? But it's so, so, so incredibly powerful. I know I keep saying that, and again, Roxanne, thank you so much for jumping on and being vulnerable and speaking your truth and unpacking what you're going through as well. Annette, any last words?
What I could do, given the people that came on, I'm very happy to share my coaching cards with those people, but what they need to do, let me go, sorry. Actually, I'd like them to do that in a moment, but if they scan that, and they can sign up for my newsletter, and if they do sign up, I can send them my coaching cards. And so they can try out using some of the questions, but they need to scan that so I get their email address. And Roxanne, I want to make sure I send one to Roxanne for being so.
I was going to say, I'll add this slide in particular into our email that goes out after the session with the recording of the webinar and links to all of your website, but I'll make sure that this is its own little slide so that you can scan it if you don't manage to do that now. And for everybody that doesn't, that registered but wasn't able to make the session today, that's amazing.
Yeah, let me do the caveat. The people on live get the coaching cards, but anyone else who's listening afterwards, they can certainly sign up for the newsletter and get coaching tips through that as well. Yeah.
I love it. Again, thank you so much, Annette. Like I said, I'll add all of her details into our webinar follow-up email that I'll send out later on today. If you have any questions, I'll have all of Annette's contact details in there. So please reach out. I know that she would love to chat to you guys more, as would we. So if you have any questions about Myosh or about Annette Gray Consulting, please don't be shy. We're always around and happy to chat. I hope you all have a wonderful day. Again, thank you so much, Annette. And we'll chat soon.
All right. Thank you very much, Christina.
Bye.